This is Return, Rose B Simpson for Providence Landmark. Proposal for a public art piece to be installed in a new city center of Providence, Rhode Island. A little bit about myself. I'm from Santa Clara Pueblo in northern New Mexico. I live in my ancestral homelands. I am a mixed media sculptor who works mainly in ceramics and figurative elements. So a lot of my work is very much in relationship to place and concept. These are two figurative, life-size figurative busts that are installed and photographed next to our river in Santa Clara Pueblo in northern New Mexico. Most of my work is really materials based. So it is in direct relationship to space and also the materials of space. This is a recent piece I did. There were 4 of these 8-foot large ceramic figures installed in these glass windows at the Savannah College of Art and Design, intentionally made to bring tension between the clay and the fragile elements of ceramic and glass. Most of my work is very much based on social awareness, gender ambiguity, the voices of people of color, many spoken and sort of unsupported voices within our communities around vulnerability, self-awareness, and also our ancestral future technologies that are often related to awareness of our ecological and social realities in our contemporary world. So here is our context. Our context is a new parkway and bridge that was built after the removal of a major freeway interstate thoroughfare through the city that divided different areas and sections of the town very intentionally. And this section of freeway was deleted, and in that place has been built a beautiful bridge and a parkway that is intended to bring the public together and create a social space and in the long run to heal the community. This is my idea of what I can contribute to this process of healing. It's a 30-foot tall mixed media figure that is representing that internal and external relationship to space and place, the past and the future of Providence, Rhode Island. This piece is about returning. It's about returning humbly to our history, to ourselves, our raw and our evolving truths. May we return to our relationship to our planet and our ecological family. The return to face our home, our community, and each other. That active return, rebuilding us, reminding us to continue to reflect, evolve, and choose ever more wisely. This piece is facing the bay, and yet it turns upstream to face the origins. It faces the city center. It faces where the water comes from, and it is in reflection, but in that reflection, it is also creating a new future. This piece will be built of mixed media, including cast and hammered bronze and copper panels with visible rivets built on a stainless steel armature that is visible and represents not only the industrial past, but also the proactive future that humanity as a creative force and the materials that our creative force has been in direct relationship to has the possibilities of that. Thank you for taking time to check out this, and we will continue. Okay, so here we'll more detail about the project. So some of the concepts that I was really thinking about with return was the importance of certain aspects of this creative process and the relationship to certain concepts. One of them was the genderqueer, culturally ambiguous features of the piece itself that has intentional features that are influenced by people of color. So instead of being very specific or a portrait of one person, I was considering expressing a figure that was of a community that is not often represented in these places. I wanted it to be large scale so that it was, that it stood out in a very active architectural space. So there's bridges, there's towers, there's new buildings, there's old buildings, there's a beautiful river, there's a bay, there's ships, there's factories, and this piece needed to hold its own. And I didn't want it to be too grounded. I wanted it to be lifted and powerful. So it will be mixed media with bronze, copper, cement, masonry, and wood elements, all adhered to a large, architecturally sound stainless steel armature that references a lot of the industry, and especially contrasted or against the bridge there and some of the other architectural elements. I think it will be powerful to sort of bring a connection to the area itself, not only with strictly modern technologies, but also with the history of sort of the Industrial Revolution and the history there, but also of travel and of how that industry has allowed and forced waves of different peoples and social communities into Providence itself. And the bridge and the river are incredible metaphors of that connection and reconnection and those cycles of refreshing and access and crossing over into new communities and new spaces and connection and relationship. The piece also needed to represent a future resident of Providence. And I feel like with many of my pieces, there's intentionality behind it. And that intentionality is building a reality and building a possibility. And so I was thinking of what I would want those future people or community members to look like and be like. And part of that was transparency, internal awareness, and how I represent that was through parts and materials and hardware that are visible and aesthetically considered, and they're self-aware parts. And I'm hoping that future person is self-aware and transparent. Also in relationship to our human relationship with time, with natural materials. It's geological, it has layers, has water lines and layers of geologic time that represents on the piece itself through different materials. And those materials are natural, even though this piece is permanent and can be maintained into the future. It is also the possibility to decompose. It will not be trash ever. It will always have the opportunity to turn back into natural materials, which I found really important. And here's an image of this place itself, of that bridge, of the parkway, and of those fingers that are reaching in every direction. The metaphors of land, of water, of air, of access, of movement, creating a piece that had an open bottom, lifted it up and allowed movement even within and without the piece. And so there's even a relationship between self and piece. Much like a lot of my work is very much related to social relationships and history, and also our environment. And so these pieces are representations of empowerment and reflection around our relationship to our natural environment. The piece on the right is actually installation from the Nevada Museum of Art that's up currently. And it is made with ceramic and earthen materials. And what it does is it actually gives consciousness to the materials, the things that we objectify, and how do we turn those materials themselves into beings that can watch us. And in that, there's accountability down further into the future. And I think about the materials and the smells and the sights of Providence. After living in Providence for 2 years in graduate school, I fell deeply in love with the space. And I would walk and walk in the fall, in the winter with the snow, in the spring with the cold and the ice. And I would marvel at the colors and at the saturation, the intense hues that were possible with when materials related to the environment, to the rain, to the sky, to the ground, to people's interaction, and how you can see this is the bridge in the rain, and how the screws like are vibrant against the wood that is graying from the sun and the weather. Here you can see the moss on the wood of the tree. And also the industry and human hands that are interacting and showing history. So here on the left, you see a masonry wall with a window that has been filled and probably decades ago. And there's a story here. There's always these deep stories in these textures and these visual elements. Here on the right is a piece of copper or bronze that has been patinaed through the weather. So when I left the last time I was in Providence, I was so inspired by these elements of place and human interaction. And I sat down and I started using those colors and trying to figure out how I can represent that introspection, that future thinking through ancestral consciousness, and also awareness of place and space, and also a deep love, which is my own deep love for Providence, and that reflection of how Providence has created a piece of me. And I came home and I got to make this piece and pour my love into that movement of reflection and contemplation and sentiment in some way. And here we have me. I made this piece to study how the different materials would come together, but also how you can make a form that is in that moment of twisting and returning and spinning. And in conversation with fabricator Paul Amaral there in Providence, I got to really learn a lot about what we can do and how exciting it'll be to build a piece that has an armature that meets a lot of engineering needs, and is safe and is interactive, but also holds up the concept in a really strong and grounded way. And so I was able to take the concept of spin and add this element of armature that lifts it up, opens it up, and really, really gets that concept of transparency. Here you can see where I was considering adding the hammered copper and cast bronze, inlaid wood, tinted and untinted concrete, which would have my fingerprints in it. The stainless steel is visible in between a masonry grounding. I'm really excited about the potential of showing the transparency of actually creating and showing these materials. So to wrap it up, I really feel like this piece really digs and finds a center of Providence, or it'll create a center and an intentional direction for the future of Providence in relationship to space, to history, to cultural and social relationships, where we can be introspective and vulnerable, and maybe by standing and looking at this piece in the rain, in the sun, in relationship to time, building a relationship to this piece and watching, perhaps it changed slightly from the weather and from human interaction, walk through the bones of it and look up inside and maybe wonder how that feels to be inside of ourselves and to look up inside of ourselves and to turn around and reflect on our own stories of Providence and our own relationship and future of what this place looks like and will be. And we consider the natural elements of water, of rain, of ocean, of river, of our buildings made of stone and brick and mortar and steel and glass, and all these elements that were gifts to us. And that we build conversation. I look forward to building conversation around these and using incredible community resources like the different universities, art spaces, cultural centers, and creating conversations, talking about histories, hearing different perspectives, new people coming into the city and hearing from people who have lived there forever. People who have lived there forever, hearing the stories of why new people wanted to come to Providence and what is our heart's desire, what is our combined interest for the future of Providence. I feel like this piece can be a key to a new way of thinking and being that I feel could be incredibly healthy and proactive into the future, considering the past, that we can heal rifts and build bridges over rivers that divided us, and take down the freeways that created spaces of death and lack of communication, and start to look within and look without and build family, a big Providence family.